Before the game, I stood up in the press box, and there was an old saying, no cheering in the press box. And I stood up in front of everybody, and I called everybody to attention in the press box. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, tonight there will be cheering in the press box. And there was. In my mind, that game had a lasting impact. You know, I've met probably in my lifetime 300,000 or 400,000 people who say they were there. And I was one of the handful of people who actually was there. And one of them, Al Michaels, subsequently became one of my closest friends. So that's a sweet and nice irony. One of the reasons why people remember it so vividly who were there, people want to remember it vividly who weren't there, and why it retains real resonance, it seems important, more important than sports is or generally should be, is because the United States was having a rough time. People felt as if our presence and power in the world had eroded some. Our importance and the apex of our power was in those years shortly after World War II, and it continued to increase into the 60s, and when we landed a man on the moon in 69. And now here it was early in 1980, and we had Watergate. Carter gets elected after Nixon, who was a disgrace. Then the hostages get taken to Iran. Then there's the attempt to rescue the hostages in Iran, which failed, which was a great blow to the American psyche. So America was a little bit dispirited. It was basically to see whether David had a shot against Goliath. The Soviet Union was the Goliath of world hockey. NHL players were not playing for the U.S. or Canada in the Olympics. Very few European players were playing in the NHL at the time, so we didn't know how good European hockey was. The growth of all that occurred in the next decade or two. But the Soviets had toured the United States and had beaten NHL all-star teams and regular NHL teams like a drum. I mean, they really played them tough. They had a great goaltender. They had a tough coach who's now in the Hockey Hall of Fame. If they played 100 times, that Soviet team would have won 99 times. The best player on the team was a guy named Morrow, who was a defenseman, tall guy. He'd been drafted by the New York Islanders, and he went immediately to the NHL. You know, I mean, they won the gold medal on a Sunday in February, whenever it was. And he was in the NHL a week later, and he played on a team that won the Stanley Cup that game, the Islander team that won the Stanley Cup, you know, just a few months later. So in a very short period of time, he won the gold medal and the Stanley Cup. Jim Craig, the goalie, who had an amazing series during the Olympics, was drafted by Atlanta and never amounted to much of an NHL player, had a very short career. Michael Ruzioni, who's the most celebrated player, I don't think ever played the NHL. There was a good player named Johnson, whose father was the coach at the University of Wisconsin, who played in the NHL. But there weren't a lot of NHL players. They were a team. They'd been together for a year almost. And they, you know, whereas most Olympic teams are all-star teams that are patched together, these guys were a team. And, you know, they just got hot. They had a hot goalie. If the other team can't score, you don't have to do much to win. And that's the way they played. It really was a big deal for America